I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Ryan Gable. Check out my films Doors of Perception on Amazon Prime, Occult Louisiana's on Tubi, Roku, Apple, and a few more. We're having our fundraiser for movie number 3. If you'd like to make a donation, we have links right in the description. Anything is greatly appreciated. My films are all completely self-funded with the help of your kind donations. We are booking guests for February. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome back to the show Ryan Gable. He is an author, researcher, veteran radio personality, and producer for The Secret Teachings. Ryan, welcome back. How you doing?
Fantastic. Thank you for having me back on. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a little while. It's great to have you back. It seems you've been doing great on the other side of the planet in Japan. Very happy to see that. And 2025 is almost over. Just a few more days for the Deagle report U.S. population numbers to drop by 75%. We've got that to look forward to in 2026. And, of course, the alien invasion has to happen this year. My Arcturian Palladian channeler assured me of this. Overall, 2025 was quite the dumpster fire of a year. It's certainly not the worst we've experienced in our modern history. But today I am looking forward to once again getting your insights. Your research peels through some of the deeper layers that are at play in our reality. Lots to get to. Before we do, remind the audience about yourself and let them know how they can find out more.
Yeah, my show's The Secret Teachings. It airs Monday through Friday, and there are many ways you can find it. The easiest is the website at tstradio.info. For those of you who do not know who I am, I don't really like to take sides on issues, even though it might appear that I do. It'll probably sound like that tonight. I try to be very objective about whatever the subject is, which ultimately results in it sounding like I'm taking both sides, to different people who have certain perspectives on the world. So what I do is try to cut through the narratives and find what's at the core of them. And you can find that on my show Monday through Friday, as I said, at tstradio.info. I've also been hosting Ground Zero recently, and you can find that in my archive as well as groundzeroplus.com is their website. Those are two ways to find me. Not much social media because I've been banned from almost everything, but you can find me on X and Facebook, and there's a handful of episodes on YouTube. We do live Friday streams, but it's all on tstradio.info.
Right on. Well, being part of the quote-unquote alternative media, how do you feel about the job the alternative media has done this year, reporting on some of the events and producing the conspiratorial theories that have driven the madness this year? How do you feel about that?
Well, it's a good question that I have not answered that question. No one's asked me that question yet this closing of the year. But it reminds me, when you ask me that, it reminds me of when I was first in radio 15 years ago, and I used to go to, some of them were We Are Change events. Some of them were more like libertarian events in Florida, Orlando, Daytona sometimes, Daytona Beach. And I used to go to this one event that was like a 9/11, quote, truth event. And they used to talk to people on the streets and give them stuff from architects and engineers, which I think Richard Gage finally left that organization, I believe. And we used to get together with people like Richard Gage and talk to them. And so I was confused all those years ago when people started to shift their views, and I didn't have a political stance on something. Maybe I considered myself libertarian, but I noticed people starting to shift their views and sort of adapt more. I mean, this was 2010, 11, start adapting more to the full administration of Barack Obama. And I realized after the fact that these were people that called themselves liberals and Democrats and people that borderline on the libertarian movement. I mean, there's a little bit of that on both sides. And I learned that as long as Obama was the president, it didn't matter if there were war crimes or theft of taxpayer money or whatever the corruption or the fraud or the conspiracy was, because there's Democrats in charge. And then I learned the same thing with Republicans, especially under Trump in 2016, which wasn't as bad as what's happening now by far. But we're seeing, to answer your question, we're seeing precisely what I think to answer your question. I think that now that it's not just Republicans, it's like this perception of America, America's back, America first. And it has been the total opposite and the total antithesis of that, like to the absolute extreme. And I think that people that are within that group have a really difficult time coping with reality. That what they thought was America first is anything but America first. I mean, really, Obama was probably more America first than this administration is. Maybe not literally, but it feels that might be the case going back a decade plus. I mean, hell, George Bush Jr. might have been more America first than this current administration, or at least equally not so much.
Yeah.
So when you notice that people only care about corruption or conspiracies so long as their side's not involved or the other side is involved, it can be very disheartening and it can be very demoralizing. I've learned to deal with it by trying to take a different approach, and that is try to find similarities where we have things in common, socially, culturally, etc., and try to ignore those other things that are usually very sensitive subjects that don't get us anywhere. But in trying to do that, I've also learned that it doesn't matter if you're trying to be objective, because you're going to eventually, I mean, if you're being objective about something, you're removing emotions from it. So when you do that, that means that you're able to approach any issue without really being invested in it. You're just saying, well, there's this way, there's that way, there's a couple of different ways to look at that. And that, of course, makes everybody angry. It pisses everybody off because you're not on their team. And if you're not on their team, you must be on the other team, even if you're not. So going back to your question, this is how I kind of view, well, not just my show, but I feel like there's a lot of people like me who are sort of evolving to that mindset. People that I know personally, people that I know in the radio industry. And as the alternative media goes, I feel like they have been not a little bit, but like wholly and completely, even this last week with the story about Nick Shirley, I believe it's been wholly, completely compromised to the point where the mainstream media has evolved into the alternative media, or vice versa, or a little bit of both.
Since you mentioned this current administration, what are some of the agendas and what are your concerns about this administration that most people aren't paying attention to that are unfolding? I can tell you some of the big ones that are obvious are the technocratic tech bros takeover, the policies surrounding technology and AI that are being implemented by this administration as well. That's one of the biggest and most concerning to me, but what are some of the other things that you're seeing?
Well, I agree with you. I think that's probably one of the biggest and probably least talked about issues. And it involves every administration. It also involves a necessity to be objective. I mean, obviously, speaking from an objective point of view, an American point of view, if countries like China or Russia, whether they're friend or foe, are developing very, very sophisticated artificial intelligence that could be used for, well, quite literally anything, economic warfare, or physical warfare, well, then you would obviously want to construct something. You would want to build something and beat them to the punch. The problem is, in my assessment, the problem is this has nothing to do with China. It has nothing to do with Russia. It has everything to do with the controlling of information, the controlling of your perception of reality. And it goes beyond that to the controlling of you physically down to the very cells in your body. Because I think this connects in a lot of ways to the UFO issue. And I don't know about you, but I've heard you have the I Want to Believe poster up there in your studio. I used to have one too before I moved over here. I got rid of it. But I've joked around. I did a show actually this year called I Don't Want to Believe, because I believe, the thing I do believe is that the whole disclosure movement, I know this might sound unrelated to your question, but I think it's linked. The whole disclosure movement has really devolved, if there was anything good about it, has really devolved into what I call a closure movement. I mean, we're basically closing the door on legitimate UFO, UAP, whatever you want to call it, investigation. I believe we're doing that because all the people that are going to Congress and saying, look what I have, they never show up with what they claim that they have. They don't show up to the SCIF meetings. They come and tell stories. Most of them are, I refer to it as thrift store UFO shopping. It's second, third, fourth hand accounts. It's stuff that for people maybe like you and probably a lot of your audience, I know my audience, we've heard about this stuff for our entire lives. None of it is new. It's a lot of UFO mythology. But the point I'm getting at in regard to AI and technology is that when Dan Farr went on Joe Rogan a couple of months ago, depending on when you're listening to this, but he went on in 2025, the guy that did the Age of Disclosure documentary. Yeah. And if you watch it, just objectively, if I remove myself, my background from it, and I'm watching it, it's compelling because, oh my God, look, there's members of Congress, there's members of federal agencies, there's people at the Pentagon, and they're talking about UFOs and demons and aliens and technology and all, and that sounds real compelling. There's scientists. And then you learn who a lot of these people are. You learn who Luis Elizondo is, who I've met, by the way. He's a very nice guy. But Luis Elizondo has been caught selling lots of fake UFO stories. Recently, he's been selling fake UFO stories. He sold a chandelier, quite literally, I believe it was a chandelier that was photoshopped into a picture. Others thought that it was just a cloud formation. He sold that as a secret photo. He sold a crop irrigation circle.
Well, he's counterintelligence, right? In your mind,
I think he has to
wouldn't you think that that's what he did when he was actively working intelligence. He was working counterintelligence, and you would think if he did that at one point, why would he not be still implementing that now within the UFO community, right?
Richard Doty style, yeah. And I think that Luis Elizondo is, well, like with David Grush. David Grush was also intelligence, and people might say, well, I mean, the intelligence community, that's where you're going to find the truth about this stuff. And maybe, but again, the problem is with people like David Grush, even with Bob Lazar. I think people might forget this, but I have a copy of Alien Agenda by Jim Marrs, who was a pretty good friend of mine. And in that book, he quotes Bob Lazar as saying, initially, Bob Lazar had said, I don't know what I saw. I would walk past rooms in the facility and I would see things like they would have this, like almost like a child standing there with these like long arms, and it just kind of implying that there's aliens there. And then he said he would go back to the room and there would be nothing there. And he said they had posters like I Want to Believe. They had stuff like that hanging on the walls. He said it felt like a lot of mockery. And he said he didn't, I'm paraphrasing, I could pull the exact quote, but he said he didn't know if what he was being shown was real or if it was just disinfo, and if that's why he was brought in. People forget that Bob Lazar said that. And David Grush even said that. He said, I don't know. He said it in one of the News Nation interviews. I don't really know what it is. I don't know if what I'm saying is, again, I'm paraphrasing, but based on the truth. He said that in the original interview, I think it was. So when you have a Luis Elizondo, a Bob Lazar, a David Grush, even if they're genuine guys, I don't necessarily think so, but even if they are genuine guys, it can be used to peddle a narrative that's not true. And considering, again, going back to your question, but considering that the Pentagon has openly acknowledged now that the UFO mythology has been largely created by them. And you say, well, you don't trust the Pentagon. Well, not really, but so they're lying now. They lied then. Like somebody has to be lying somewhere, and I don't know if I can trust those agencies or those people. So, in regard to technology, when Dan Farr, I don't know if you heard this. I don't listen to Joe Rogan, but I listened to this interview, and he went on Joe Rogan, and he says, and Joe Rogan's been saying this over and over and over again. I keep hearing clips of this on social media. We need amnesty. We need amnesty. That's the only way we're going to get people to come forward and tell what they've experienced, what they've done at these defense contractors. And again, at first, it sounds like a good idea because there's going to be a lot of companies that say, why didn't I get access to this tech? There's going to be lawsuits and all that. Sounds like a good idea. But what they're actually saying, if you listen to the rest of that interview, is these are people that, if it's like the X-Files, they probably murdered to keep their secrets. Yeah. They've stolen trillions of dollars. That's with a T. So these are people that, by the UFO community's own admission, are liars, murderers, and thieves, and you want to give them mass amnesty. And then you get to the Marco Rubio stuff, where Marco Rubio is saying, we need to do, he didn't say amnesty, but he says we need to advance our technology rapidly to keep up with China and Russia because we don't know what these UAPs are. But it's like, hold on a second. I mean, I've got Alien Agenda. When was that book published by Jim Marrs? A long time ago. We've known about this stuff forever. It's not new. So the point is, and it takes me a long time to get to the answer because there's so many details. But my point is, to answer your question directly, I think the whole push for an AI arms race has, first of all, it has nothing to do with UFOs. That's just the justification. I think it has nothing to do with Russia. It has nothing to do with China. I think that's provable because we know that this stuff's been going on for thousands of years, actually. I think that it's about complete and absolute control. And I think when you look at the parallel things that are happening alongside of the question that you asked, you have TikTok and Paramount that were just purchased by Larry Ellison. You have Jared Kushner, who, with the Trump administration, is trying to undermine the openly, it's mainstream news even, undermine the Netflix Warner Brothers deal to get control of Warner Brothers, meaning that basically not only would the White House have control of Warner Brothers or the Trump family, but Kushner and the state of Israel would have control of Warner Brothers, which is already basically an Israeli company anyway. So, and that's on top of the TikTok sale being forced by the Trump administration to Larry Ellison. All the Chinese, you can't trust them, but you can totally trust the Israelis, who are so corrupt that the CIA doesn't even let them into their headquarters because they try to bug their greatest ally. So when you see those things happening in parallel, and you look at all the people and the names involved, the Sergey Brin hanging out with Trump, the Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook hanging out with Trump, the YouTube people, like all these people are connected to a foreign country. And that foreign country, according to Larry Ellison, is the hub of artificial intelligence. And with the exception of Peter Thiel, who's like a Christian Zionist vampire, literally he's a vampire. He openly says that. He wants the blood of young people. He had that Antichrist conference in California a few months ago, late 2025. He is one of the few people who's not, I suppose you could say, Israeli. And he is, the guy that founded Palantir. By the way, he's also the guy that was one of the original founders or investors of Rumble. But people forget that. So people like Peter Thiel with his Palantir company, and that's where you get into some of the occult stuff, though. But Peter Thiel with his Palantir company is working directly with the White House, working directly with all these other people, including the Sam Altmans. I mean, they're all of the same foreign nationality, if you will. And all of these people are involved in getting control of the media, completely getting control of economics, completely getting control of every aspect of, well, in our case, we care about America. getting control of every aspect of society. It's a takeover, it's an occupation, and that, I think, is what it's not about UFOs or Russians or Chinese. It's, if anything, it's about Israel, or at the very least, it's about total information awareness and control, which is what Palantir originally was. So I know there's a long way around to answer your question, but I hope that all of those details in that context make sense for your audience.
In my perspective, all of these psychological operations and agendas are being used for multiple purposes at the same time. Since you mentioned the UFO disclosure that's currently unfolding right now, you're basically saying that they're using that as essentially an excuse to develop AI for further control. Help us unpack that a little bit. What is the connection there that they're using the UFO disclosure movement for? What's really behind that?
Well, so there's a couple of different ways to look at this. I think the most important is to look at the parallel between the movement of disclosure and the open acceptance of that within the federal government, within national news, where it's not so much mocked anymore, it's kind of embraced and accepted. And alongside of that, here comes this guy who didn't really apparently know much about it and just decided to contact everybody in the government. And they were like, sure, I'll do a documentary with you. That kind of stuff always sounds suspicious to me. Because when I email a member of Congress, you don't get a response, or you get an automated response, and you're lucky to get anybody to actually respond to your email. So people like Dan Farr, which maybe he's a great guy, he probably is, I don't know him. But it's suspicious to me, because when you have this movement for disclosure being embraced, and then you have the officials that are running it saying, well, we need to give amnesty to everybody involved. And then what's the next step of that is we got to defeat the Chinese and Russians in this new arms race. Yeah. So if we give amnesty to all these people that have committed crimes, we can just open the floodgates, and they can do anything and everything, anything that they want with no consequences. So if they've murdered people, or if they continue to murder people, if they steal another trillion or 10 trillion, I mean, we're $38 trillion in debt. If you listen, I forget the woman's name who used to work in the Bush administration, who said they've blown 21 trillion on building basically secret facilities, underground bases, installations. So you have basically all this money that's disappeared. Catherine Austin Fitts.
Ah, yes.
So tens of trillions that have disappeared, people that have been murdered, etc. And you want to give amnesty to those people so that they can build the new technology openly to defeat the Russians or the Chinese, which what the open declaration of let's build this advanced technology, whether it's in Silicon Valley or it's Herzliya, Israel, the first use for it is surveillance and control of movements. It's not about defeating Russia. It's not about defeating China. So I think they're using the UFO, quote, disclosure narrative to justify basically just giving a it's like an eternal pardon for every crime you've ever committed and any crime you might commit in the future. It's technocracy is what it is, which makes a lot of sense when you look at who the vice president is. And J.D. Vance, oh, we hope he's the president after Trump's out of office. I hope he's the Why would you hope J.D. Vance is the president? The guy openly has stated that he gets his political ambitions. First of all, he was a student of Peter Thiel. First of all, Peter Thiel got him started in business and politics. And second of all, he gets his political philosophy from a guy who literally calls himself a dark elf named Curtis Yarvin. Literally, you could look this up. Dark elf Curtis Yarvin, who's also an Israeli as well, by the way. So Curtis Yarvin is actually the guy behind Doge. It's not Elon Musk. Curtis Yarvin's idea was to expose government corruption, very small little things here and there, stupid things, to undermine people's faith in the system in order to justify completely overturning the system, basically creating like a revolution because government spent money on giving cocaine to dogs or paying for transgender figure skaters in Palestine or something, stupid stuff like that. So that's the idea. And Curtis Yarvin's end game is he wants a techno monarchy, where someone like J.D. Vance would be a techno monarch. There'd be no more presidency, no more Congress. That's who the vice president is. And then you've got people, to go a step further, you have people like Nick Fuentes, who is pushing the idea of a Catholic monarchy. So we have, and I'm very sure that the British and British intelligence are behind and involved in a lot of this. They're pushing monarchy on the United States, techno monarchy, Catholic monarchy, whatever it is. So I think that's what a lot of this is about. It's a very complex and very sophisticated. I probably understand 0.5% of it, but it's a very complex and sophisticated revolution is what it is. And they're using UFOs to justify giving amnesty to the people that are going to build the remainder of the control grid. I mean, that's just my initial assessment. It would take a lot more to get into the details, but that's what I think.
That makes sense. What are your thoughts on where we're at technologically with AI, the reliance people have on it, how advanced it is already for videos and pictures, and how deceptive it can be and how it's being used deceptively across the board for social media? I have to thank AI because I no longer scroll at all on social media. I post my shows and I get out. There's no time wasted, although it was very little to begin with. There is no more social media in my life. Thank you, AI. But what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I'm glad that you're able to do that. I have a hard time, even though I don't have a lot of social media, I have a hard time posting the show and not trying to find another topic on there. But that's a great question, because I definitely have a different perspective than most of the people that I know. Your Chat GPTs, your Groks, and things like this. I use Grok as a search engine, which is why, like, if I couldn't find something because it's been scrubbed, I'll ask Grok, can you get me the government report on XYZ? Get me a link to it. I don't trust what Grok says, but if you give me the link to it and it takes me to U.S. State Department or DOJ or whatever it is, it's their official website, and there's the link, then it's basically a glorified search engine. But there's a giant leap between the glorified search engine of Grok and the kinds of systems that are being developed and kind of randomly or rarely discussed in the press, where a chatbot or several chatbots start communicating in Sanskrit. Or they develop their own language, right? That's a little bit different than what Grok's doing. But, the whole underlying idea here is that, like, if you look at Grok, its logo is Saturn. Grok itself, the name, it's named after a character in a book. It has to do with aliens. And then you look at, like, the Sanskrit story. You could type that in chatbots, start communicating in Sanskrit. Link that to CERN, where Sanskrit and Hinduism and Indian mythology is Shiva, and then also back to Oppenheimer with the bomb. Now I become death, the destroyer of worlds. These are the old gods. Hinduism, in its original form, the Vedas, like, this stuff is thousands of years older than almost any religion in the world. I mean, people talk about the Abrahamic faiths. That's like recent. I mean, the Vedas, I've read between 8 to 10,000 BC. That predates Abraham by thousands of years. So that religion, or those, it's not really Hinduism, but the origin of what became Hinduism and those mythologies, those gods, India is really a central pillar, more so than Africa, in terms of the evolution of religion. Buddhism comes out of there. Abrahamic faiths really come out of India, I think, too. I think Jordan Maxwell used to talk about this as well. But the point is, it's so ancient. Like, these are the old gods. These are the ancient gods. And the fact that there's so much of that incorporated into artificial intelligence, CERN, and modern technology is kind of a creepy thing, which leads me to think that, again, from Grok, which is a glorified search engine, and it tracks what you do and all that, to a chat GPT, which is probably a little bit more complex. They've also incorporated the sigil of the hexagram into the logo. If you invert the image and place it back on top of the original image, you get a hexagram, which makes sense because Sam Altman is Israeli, or the alterer of man. And so if you're looking at all of this stuff side by side, you got the Grok on one end, you got ChatGPT in the middle, and then you get to the bigger stuff, the behind the scenes stuff that you rarely hear about. And they're talking about the Shoggoth. They're talking about the cosmic horrors of H.P. Lovecraft. Geordie Rose, the guy that invented the D-Wave, he was talking about that stuff. So what I think it is more of the construction of a body, of a structure of shell, not for artificial intelligence, but for a very, or maybe organic's not the right word, but let's probably not not an organic thing like we think, but an organic thing in the sense that it's not created artificially. An organic intelligence. Call it whatever you want. It doesn't really matter what you call it. I think that's what they're building. I think they're building a shell. And I think that a lot of this stuff, you've heard probably scientists and others refer to how they're not really sure how it works.
Yeah.
They don't know how the chatbots work. How do you not know how it works if you built it? I mean, it's like your mechanic. He's like, I really have no idea how that water pump got in there. It's like, but you installed it. How do you not know, right? I don't understand that. So maybe there's some subtlety there that we don't understand that would make it make more sense to be objective about it. But what it sounds like to me is it sounds like Jodie Foster in Contact. It sounds like you're getting blueprints for something and then you're building it and you're not really sure how it works, but you can put it together. And then where is it going to take us? That's the impression that I get from this.
Yeah.
I think that's what they're building at the biggest, highest
If you
level.
look at it that way, essentially AI will become the extraterrestrials or the alien gods of the future, right?
Well, yeah, in a sense, I think that's probably a good way to look at it in that way. I think that's we get confused and we debate these. It's so silly. It's aliens, demons. Like in Age of Disclosure, they were even talking about how there's people at the Pentagon that don't want to discuss aliens because they're demons, and that conflicts with their religion. I don't really care. It doesn't really matter what you call them, because if there's something on the outside and we're opening a gate for it to come in, I don't really care what it is. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it likes us. Or like in the case of Lovecraft, it might not have any concern for us at all. It's not malicious. It's not benevolent or malevolent. It just is. And that could be arguably even more dangerous than like having a set enemy that's very malicious and intent on destruction. Something that has no concern for you at all is maybe even worse. I have
to wonder if these Silicon Valley tech dork nerds are actually actively attempting to communicate with something. You hear about their psychedelic use. Maybe they're trying to get in touch with something, or is it just that they're getting these downloads of information and they have no idea where it's coming from or the ultimate purpose of what they're building, but they feel like it's their ego is driving them to do it because it's bringing them fame and fortune and money.
Well, there's a couple of things there. One, if you ever watched American Horror Story, did you watch the Apocalypse season?
Yeah, I think so. I think I did.
It was a long time ago that came out. In that season, they were the Silicon Valley tech guys, and they made a deal with the devil. And
yeah, I
remember that? And they brought the Antichrist into existence essentially for some cocaine and sex with Victoria's Secret models once a week or something like that. But what you said about being driven by something, I mean, it's not my opinion. It's actually nobody's opinion. It's the direct statement of Les Wexner, who's also of that same foreign country, who was involved intimately with Jeffrey Epstein. And Les Wexner, with the Wexner Foundation, he said in the 1980s, there's an interview you can still find there's a magazine interview he did, where he said he is possessed by Dybbuk.
Oh, yeah.
And Dybbuk is a Jewish demon. You remember that? And it's wild stuff, right? And he said it drives him for money and fame and cars and houses and women, and that's why he doesn't get married or have a family, because he just wants, that's what the demon wants. So the thing is, this is where we breach the, you're not supposed to go there, because I mean, people will, there's a lot of jokes on social media, people making fun of anybody that commentates on Israel or says, "Oh, well, all these people in this power, structure here are Jewish. If they were Muslim, there'd be an issue with that." And people joke and say, "Oh, you're the guy that counts the Jews." It's like, no. I'm the guy that counts how many Muslims are not in things. And when I assess the technological sphere, it's like, with the exception of Peter Thiel, who are all the big heads? Sergey Brin, Yuval Harari, who's a particularly nasty individual, I think. I mean, that guy is talking about just making you have to relearn how to use your eyes like the Matrix, because he wants to physically connect you to a computer system and control everything, like control the output of your body, which turning you into a battery, basically. Yeah. So you got Yuval Harari, you got Sam Altman, the Alterer of Man, you got Larry Ellison. I mean, these are just a handful of the names, not to mention Elon Musk, who says he's aspirationally Jewish, who has signed a contract with Czech, that's with the Q, Czech, an Israeli company, to censor black list and shadow ban on X at the behest of this foreign government. The same thing with TikTok, the same thing with Zuckerberg and Facebook. These are all the people that are meeting with Trump. This is just so important, I think. If the overwhelming majority of the people that are involved in this are of a particular religion, and they're not the Orthodox conservative Torah Jews who usually reject all of this stuff, they're the ones that embrace the Bavli and the Talmudic rabbinical text. And their beliefs, if it matters what, quote, Muslims think, and it matters what the so-called Quran or Hadiths of Muhammad says, then it matters what the Bavli says. It matters what, hell, even the Torah says. It matters what the Jews that are doing this believe. And we don't have to get into any more detail than that, but the fact is, their religion matters. As a matter of fact, the guy that created the concept of, I think, what's the technical term for it, paleoastronautics or ancient aliens, was a Jewish Torah scholar, Mattis Agrist. Look at the people that are pushing the alien narrative. You've got Anna Paulina Luna. You've got, I forget the guy's full name, it's like Mikalski or something in Congress. And Avi Loeb, who I think he's actually a good guy. He's a good friend of one of my good friends, but he's also Israeli. So, I mean, you put all that together, I think the bottom line is this. The bottom line is you've got a bunch of people that are Jewish pushing technology to change and shift and alter, even Sam Altman, alter God's creation, because God messed up. And they're pissed at God because God took away their, quote, birthright and their chosen status because they violated the covenant with God over and over again in the Bible. And so if you have this core belief that is taught from childhood, that you are special and unique, and that you have a duty, not just like you have a motivation, you have a divine duty to reshape God's creation, that motivation has to mean something. It has to be at the core of this if most of the people involved in it are of that religious belief system, which is also probably why Yuval Harari, Sam Altman, and a whole bunch of these other people are gay, because they reject the natural order.
Yeah.
That's my assessment. I'll leave it there. I hope that's not too much for your audience.
We've been here plenty of times. It seems to be all about inversion. And if you take a step back and just look at the overall degradation of morality and how that has been ushered in, and the sources from where those ideologies have been ushered in, well, it goes back to a certain group of people every time. But we have to talk about the big high-impact event that occurred this year, the Charlie Kirk assassination. I haven't gotten too deep into this. It's so convoluted. There are so many pieces that don't fit together. There are so many pieces that fit together that shouldn't fit together. so many strange synchronicities and occurrences surrounding this event. It's very hard to navigate some of it, but have you looked into it at all? What do you see?
Well, there's another complex issue. You're totally right. I mean, even looking into it, it's hard to have any reasonable conclusion because you're just left with thousands of different opinions and you have no idea what's real and what's not real. I mean, there was let's start here with that movie Snake Eyes with Nicolas Cage. Did you watch that?
I've seen Snake Eyes when it came out, and I had to rewatch it after the whole thing just to take note of all of those syncs that occurred in that movie that somehow link up impossibly to that event.
Yeah, I had never seen it before. I like Nicolas Cage, so I watched it, and it was, kind of comical Nicolas Cage acting. So I watched it, and when I watched it, I'm watching it from an objective point of view. Like, I don't really, if there's connections to the Charlie Kirk assassination, all right. If there's not, there's not. So I'm watching it, and I know this is what gets me, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying about AI and not being able to trust the videos online and stuff like that. I'm watching it, and I had never seen the movie, so I had no idea what to be looking for. And as soon as it starts, it's there's that big storm, and there's a woman reporter, and they show the fight match, the billboard poster, whatever it was on the building, and it says if I remember, if I remember this correctly, just off the top of my head, I think it was September 9th was the night of the fight. And this goes back to what you're saying about AI and not trusting videos and things like this, because the conspiracy community said September 10th. And I said, oh, no, I think it says September 9th on the poster. So, or it's something like, it was like a day or two off. And I said, it's not the 10th. And you're denying the truth. You're denying reality. It's like, no, it says in the movie, it says, I mean, I understand why it looks like a 10 because it's one of those stylized 9s that almost comes back around.
Okay.
But like a little detail like that matters because if you're going around telling people the date's the same and it's not, well, that might undermine the credibility of the other connections in the film, which there were lots of them being shot. The guy was shot, Kirk, and there's all these. I thought the most here's the thing. I think in that movie, if you pay attention to it, it's actually an Israeli-U.S. conspiracy to sell weapons. Remember?
Yeah.
Nobody I heard talk about mentioned that. It was an Israeli, and they were blaming it on the Palestinians in the movie. And I'm like, wait a minute. Nobody brought that up? Considering that Charlie Kirk,
that's right.
if there's a list of people involved here that killed him, Israel's definitely in the top 3. So why did people not bring that up? I thought. I was like, maybe there probably were some people online that did. You don't see their stuff because they're shadow banned. So I noticed that. But more to the point, to answer your question, there's critical details, like symbolically, where he was sitting from an aerial view was a giant menorah. I don't think that's a coincidence. It's like it wasn't a giant set of Kwanzaa candles. It was a giant menorah. If it was like a giant Christian cross, that would be different, but it's a giant menorah and he's at the center of it. So like that's, I think, symbolically significant. The fact that there's reports about the guy that supposedly shot him having changed their clothes and then changed their clothes back and then changed them again or did a dance and flipped over. I don't know if it's meant to be confusing or if these people are genuinely serious, like they expect the public to believe that. I think going back to actually what you had talked about with the alternative media at the beginning, you asked me about the alternative media at the beginning of this show. Here's another great example of that. I listened to, I think it was one of the hosts of InfoWars because they popped up at the top of my feed on social media. And I can't say for certain which one it was. I can't remember. But they said that this is a quote. This is burned in my brain. This might be the first time that the official narrative was ever true about Tyler Robinson. And I thought, InfoWars thinks this is the time, and maybe all the people there don't think that, but this one host said that. I thought, that's got to be a joke. And I watched it, and it wasn't a joke. And so I started thinking, well, hold on a second. If this is what they believe, the amount of influence InfoWars has on the general, public that doesn't watch Fox, CNN, et cetera, the people that are conspiracy minded, how's it going to affect those people? And of course, it affects them like you'd assume. They just believe it.
Yeah.
In fact, our mutual friend Ryder Lee and I were just talking about this the other day. He was telling me some very strange connections to the JFK assassination, which I thought were brilliant. I think he really nailed those. He did a show with Jay Widener on them because they had done that JFK X documentary, I think it was. So Ryder and I were talking, and he was like, "How do people still believe this? That this guy did it?" And I said, "It's probably because InfoWars told them that he did it." And so whether or not there's like some grand conspiracy of compromise, you can just see how there's no thought put into it. The people that are info warriors, and not every InfoWars listener, like I listened still this year on occasion for entertainment. I can't even turn it on for that reason anymore. But on average, like the narrative that came out of InfoWars was that Tyler Robinson did it, and now they're at war with Candace Owens. So whether it's like there are outside forces trying to create these conflicts and setting people against each other, or there's massive compromise. I think there's massive compromise at InfoWars dealing with those lawsuits that were forgiven and nothing too terribly bad actually happened, which I think is the same thing would happen to how Trump was completely compromised as well with those lawsuits. But that's how these stories like Charlie Kirk are handled. And then you get the other end of the spectrum. You get the real crazy people who said that he was killed by space weapons.
Oh, I haven't heard that one.
What? Oh, you haven't heard that one? Yeah, space weapons. There's an in-between. There's drones. There's space weapons. I wouldn't disregard the the lavalier mic simply because of the pager story out of Israel. That these people have done things like that before. So I wouldn't, but that doesn't mean that the people pushing that narrative, I believe and trust everything that they say. I mean, that's just the whole point of trying to be objective, is like, I don't think it was space weapons. I don't think it was a drone. I think that's out of the realm of possibilities. I don't think that's even relevant as a consideration. However, there are other weird things like that, like a lavalier mic that sounds crazy, but considering the accusations against the people that are supposedly involved, they've done stuff like that before, so it really isn't that much of a stretch. So in regard to Charlie Kirk, my overall assessment is like, personally, I had a friend of mine, a good, well-known friend of mine, who called me. It was late his time, early morning my time. He woke me up and he said, when Charlie died, he said, Charlie Kirk died. And my first assessment was, like, my first thought was, it's kind of surreal, because I used to listen to Charlie Kirk. It's kind of surreal. And as soon as I looked into it and I saw the stuff that he was saying, I was like, oh, I bet the Mossad killed him. I mean, even if he didn't say those things about his donors and call them stereotypically Jewish billionaire donors, even if he didn't say that, these people also have a history of murdering their own to justify more migration to Israel or to justify more restrictions on civil liberties and civil rights. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. And then you see the menorah, and you see like George Zinn, who's also he was also involved in the Boston bombing, I think, too. He claimed he was at the World Trade Center on 9/11. That's a lot of coincidental things you just happen to be there. And then the guy asking Charlie the question, he's also Jewish. The guy that protested against the memorial, he was the Jewish agent too. Like, at some point, it has to come into play that those are important details. Yeah. So that's my personal viewpoint. But otherwise, I have no idea, and I think all the fighting is kind of silly. It is.
Since you mentioned the mainstream alternative media phenomena, such as Candace Owens and InfoWars, it seems 2025 was a big year for the rise of this mainstream alternative media. I remember back in 2018, 2019, when shows like mine and yours were gaining traction and becoming really popular because people were starting to become curious about a lot of these things. In 2020, it came to a peak, and then the censorship started to roll in, and voices like ours got pushed to the background. But then we have people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson coming in, swooping in, and it's diabolically brilliant. They basically took over the conspiracy culture and can control it in a very powerful way using their alternative media talking heads, in a sense.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree with your assessment. Now, in regard to the stuff that Tucker or Candace and those people are saying, I mean, when people say, but what they're saying is kind of true, so why wouldn't you listen to them? It's like, well, that's the whole point of disinformation. Disinformation is not about lying; it's about disinforming. Like when you're disingenuous, you're not being completely forthright. Now that could, I mean, I don't know about Tucker Carlson's his father's CIA connections. I mean, that's kind of suspicious to me. I agree with a lot of stuff he says, but again, that's how good propaganda works. Good propaganda is not a lie; it's actually the truth. That's just kind of twisted.
Yeah.
As far as Candace Owens goes, I do have some questions about her husband and her husband's connections. The same way that I got questions about Erica Kirk and her pro-Israel tour that she just went on. My husband was not killed by Israel. He loved Israel. I mean, who does that? That's bizarre. And she sat down with Barry Wise, the anti-Semitism czar, who was installed at CBS. She's an idiot. Installed at CBS by Larry Ellison after he bought it. But no, the Muslims and the Arabs control our media. It's unbelievable, man. Anyway, the point is, in regard to the alternative media, Candace and all these people, when I was on a network called Aftermath Media that collapsed earlier this year in 2025, and I was kicked off of it last year around September, October 2024. Maybe it was more like October, November. And I was kicked off of it because I was on, this is a quick story. I was kicked off of it because I was on what do they call them? Like a roundtable kind of discussion with listeners, like a weekend special event. And I said something that one of the people didn't like because they were Jewish. And I said, the pig orc in Lord of the Rings was modeled after Harvey Weinstein. It's true. Elijah Wood confirmed that. He said that it was. It's a fact. Yeah. Oh, I didn't like that. So I ended up getting removed from the network. Now, the reason I'm tell you that story is because they had just done a survey of the top shows on the network. And mine was, of the top shows that were not ground zero, my show was number one by far. And the number one request for my show was interview Candace Owens, which I had been trying to do. And I ended up telling the network, I was like, well, if Candace Owens came on my show, what do you think she's going to want to talk about? The same thing that you want to remove me from the network over. So when I think about that in regard to your question, because whether or not you trust Candace Owens, the fact that they, in regard to every talking head and media outlet, are doing to her exactly what they did to Kanye West. Kanye West got on stage and said, Google lied to you. All these companies lied to you. You can't trust them. Just like that. Whisked off to UCLA, mental health conditions. They released some 911 call. Don't let him get any guns. He's crazy. This crazy black guy who then, I think, got a lobotomy. He got the Jolene West treatment at UCLA. And then he comes out with blonde hair. And he's just like staring with these big eyes. Yes, I feel better. It's like a movie. It's crazy. And they're doing the same thing to Candace Owens. She has an opinion, and considering that she's a black conservative, well, now you can't have that. So what are they doing with Candace Owens? Doesn't matter if you trust her or not. They're giving her the Kanye West treatment. They're giving her you're just crazy and you need mental assistance. You are mentally ill and need to be institutionalized. And that goes doubly for black commentators, black political figures who are speaking out of line. There is a racial element to it. It's not coming from white people, though, because all the people that are pushing the Candace Owens is mentally ill, they're all also Jewish, or they're Jewish bot accounts on social media. One of my favorites was, and I saw it when it first started, was there's no way Candace Owens knows what's in the Talmud. The Talmud's comprised of dozens of books, which is that old Democrat liberal attitude of blacks are illiterate, blacks can't read, blacks don't know what they're talking about, they're inherently stupid. And so, ironically, proving her point that a tremendous number of the people that were involved in facilitating the slave trade were not white. They were Jews. And so the Jews come back and say, you're not even literate enough to read those books, Candace Owens. So when I see that, I start thinking, well, why did they come after Kanye West? Because he went after Sergey Brin. He went after, well, not after, he started saying things that were, quote, pro-Hitler. And who came after him? The same exact people. So I can't help but think that in giving Candace Owens the Kanye West treatment, we're back to that same group of people again that have complete control or almost complete control of the media. And that is very telling. And it should tell black folks a lot more than it tells white folks about who is responsible for any perceived or any kind of legitimate injustices from a racial perspective. So in regard to Candace Owens, I agree with almost everything that woman says in regard to her, her inside sources and all that. I don't know if any of that's true. It's not a hill that I choose to fight on, let alone die on. But the stuff she says, certain things she says, I mean, like with the slave trade stuff, it's true. Right. I'm right. I just wrote a book on it, as a matter of fact. I have a chapter on that in my book. And I just pulled the encyclopedic articles from the Encyclopedia Judaica. She's right. Doesn't mean I agree with everything she says, but they're giving her the mental illness treatment because she quoted the Encyclopedia Judaica. That should tell you something. Also, about just any kind of news or reporting. And I have another example for you, if it's okay if I give it about something else. Another example of that having nothing, well, I guess it has a little bit to do with Israel, but not so much, is just Nick Shirley. I had never maybe heard of this kid except in passing. He was a YouTuber. We'll keep this real brief. The story came out on December 26th. I don't know if you watched the video. He exposed the Somalian fraud in Minnesota. Have you seen this? Have you heard about this? So in a nutshell, this YouTuber who used to make prank videos, now he's like an investigative journalist, which is, I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean that that's good. That's what the U.S. is all about. You can investigate and research things. You have a right to do these things. But he investigated these daycare centers in Minnesota and found that most of them didn't have any kids, and that there's a lot of taxpayer dollars being given to these communities, and a lot of them are run by Somalians, etc. The thing is, it's true. Yeah. It's completely true. The problem is this, though. Elon Musk, Alex Jones, these are not random people. It's one of the richest guy in the world, and then one of the most influential voices in the media in the world. We're posting things on X, like, for example, Elon Musk posted a bunch of memes and comments about how nobody covered this before Nick Shirley. ABC News didn't cover it. Fox News didn't cover it. The state hasn't done anything about it. Alex Jones said it was the fraud of the century, which I thought, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. I think the Pentagon failing their 8th budget and still getting $1 trillion might be the fraud of the century. Yeah. I can think of a bunch of other examples. But it's interesting that I say that because on the 26th of December, magically the same day he posted that video, that's when the Pentagon failed their 8th straight audit and got in 2025, they got the budgetary approval. But with this audit fail, they should have been cut off from the $1 trillion budget. They got it anyway. But nobody heard about that because of the Shirley video. But it gets even more interesting because it took me quite literally less than 60 seconds to go online and to find that not only had ABC News already covered this, ABC News Local had covered it, and another journalist, I think his name was Jay Kohler, had already done an almost identical video to Nick Shirley. and exposed hundreds of millions of dollars of fraud. There's the same Somalian daycare centers and facilities. And he interviewed a whistleblower on ABC News, and that was posted October 20th of this year. So I started thinking, why are these people saying that no one has covered this before? ABC News covered it a few weeks ago. Then I found Fox News covered it in 2018. I found that local media in Hennepin County in Minnesota, where most of those places are located, those daycare centers, I found, this is all in under 60 seconds, by the way, I found that they had already arrested and charged people with fraud going back to 2015. There was another Fox report from 2013, which means the story is minimum a decade old. Maximum, we're looking at 12, 13 years old. So why is it being sold to us as something new? They're pushing the idea that Nick Shirley should get the Pulitzer Prize. I was joking on my show the other night. I said I should get one too because two planes just crashed into the World Trade Center. We'll be back with the breaking news. Like, it's 20 something years old. I get a Pulitzer Prize for reporting something something that another reporter already reported on. It's like a comedian stealing jokes. Now I don't think Nick Shirley is like malicious, but I think that something else is going on here because I found the state of Minnesota legislative auditor did a full state investigation on those Somalian facilities. Not all of them are Somalian, but a lot of them are. And they're taking the money, and it's not immigrants necessarily. It's groups that are funneling it back to terrorist organizations. And the state audit report found that, contrary to what people might think, they covered it up. No, actually, they opened the floodgates. They exposed all of it and said it's billions of dollars in fraud, hundreds of millions here. They're sending it to terrorist groups. It's so widespread, we can't even put our finger on the pulse of it, is how bad it is in Minnesota. Wow. And we can assume it is nationally too. And yet Elon Musk and Alex Jones and all the media is telling us nobody's covered this before. So in conclusion, I started thinking, okay, there's got to be something else going on here. Why is the alternative media the tip of the spear even telling us that this has never been covered? This is huge breaking news. This kid's been on Fox. I think he was on InfoWars. He's been all over the place. So I did a little bit of research into his background. That took maybe 120 seconds, 2 minutes maybe. And you know what I found? I found that earlier this year, this kid spent a nice springtime trip in Gaza. Oh. Well, in Israel, on the border of Gaza, which is where most kids want to go. They want to go hang out in Gaza, right? He claims that he went there on his own dime. Maybe he did. But he goes in and interviews a colonel in the IDF. I'm sure you can easily set that up if you're looking to have that interview too.
Yeah, right.
And he releases videos that are not, he's not acting pro-Israel. He's not acting anti-Israel. He's acting neutral. He's like, I don't know what's going on here. Why don't you tell me? It's a propaganda video because, I mean, objectively, if he came back and had something that wasn't pro-Israel, he would have probably got a bullet in the head or not been allowed to fly back home, or they would have confiscated his videos. So I found out he did that. And then I started thinking, oh, okay. And then I started seeing videos, people saying, for all of those out there claiming that Israel gets all this money, now you know that Somalians are the ones that are really ripping you off. And so it's probably a disinfo campaign, considering that X has a contract with Israel to censor content, and they've pushed this to the top of all the feeds. That probably feeds into this. And then the most important part of all is the fact that not only did the Pentagon fail that audit, but still get that $1 trillion defense budget. Well, the same exact week, in fact, the day it went super viral on the 28th, 29th, a couple of days after it was posted, guess who was in the U.S.? Netanyahu. And guess where Netanyahu went? He went to Trump, Mar-a-Lago. And guess what Netanyahu and Trump were talking about? Among other things, 3 critical things. They were talking about how the U.S. just launched a war in Venezuela. That hasn't made much news. They blew up a depot. They talked about how Iran is going to have to be dealt with. We're going to have to go to war with Iran. And in the process of all that, Trump said he spoke with the Israeli president and they're going to give Netanyahu a pardon, thanks to the U.S. government. So all of that and the Pentagon budget and all that, that conveniently gets left out of the equation. Plus one little tiny last critical detail. This Nick Shirley kid met with Jake Lang, the Israeli agent provocateur, who with a Deus Vult, God wills it podium, openly said in Minnesota, Muslims need to leave the United States or we're going to send you packing with a new crusade. Strange rhetoric considering that the Pentagon is run by Pete Hegseth, who literally says that we're going to have a crusade against Islam. Good thing he has $1 trillion budget to get started.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you also have InfoWars selling Crusader posters. So I'm pretty sure that it wasn't investigative journalism. I'm pretty sure that it was an operation to promote war. And that's what you get with the new modern alternative media. It's become the mainstream media, and instead of Fox and ABC and CNBC and MSNBC and all the others pushing war in Iraq or Afghanistan, now it's InfoWars pushing war in Iran. Now it's InfoWars pushing war in Venezuela. It's the same exact identical story, just with new people, new characters. It's a what do they call that in television? They call it like a remake or a revamping of an old TV show. That's all that it is. And the end result is millions are dead and trillions are stolen. But hey, we're making America great, right?
So much
It's a
theater.
big joke to
It's
me.
all propaganda theater. Well, Ryan, this was fantastic. Any plans or major goals for 2026?
Yeah, I'm uncertain when this will get the most ears, but I have a real fun, to kind of change the subject a little bit. I have a really fun New Year's Eve show.
Oh, this will premiere
that
tonight,
you
so
can-
it'll get some ears.
Excellent. So that, or if you're listening to it later, you can go back and watch this. It's totally free. As of right now, if it goes well, I got a 4-hour block scheduled from roughly 8:15 p.m. Eastern to just after midnight Eastern time. And we're going to have a great time with special guests like Jay Widener and special guests like John Christian Spadavaccia, and David Oates is going to be on the show. And we're going to do a fun countdown to ascension prophecies and New Age prophecies not coming true again in 2025.
I love it.
So that would be a fun show you can find in my archive, or totally free, no ads on YouTube. You can find links to that on tstradio.info. And if you want more of what we talked about tonight, you ask me questions, I respond, but on my show it's like 2 hours of just analysis, no breaks. So if people want more of that and they're into that, you go to the website, you can find all the archived shows. I appreciate you having me on the show. Thank you. And I know how it is interviewing people like David Icke, where you're like, David, how are you doing? And then he just talks for 2 hours and you don't get to say anything else. So I try not to be that way, but I want to really answer your question with all the details
this is
that I
great.
can.
Thank you so much. Fantastic information, and we'll definitely be doing this again. Until next time, everyone, have a wonderful evening. We will talk again tomorrow. We'll see y'all then. If you're looking to start your therapeutic microdosing journey, but don't know where to start, especially when looking for the highest quality ingredients, including nootropics, and what you'd expect from a true microdose capsule, check out our friends at Brainsupreme. They offer the absolute highest quality ingredients so you can start your microdosing journey knowing that you're getting top-notch ingredients. To find out more, visit their website using that link right in the description, and you can get 15% off your entire order. Hello friends, I am so excited to tell you about Independent Media Token. Independent Media Token is a brand new way to show your support for independent media without having to donate a dime. Independent Media Token is a cryptocurrency on the Solana blockchain designed to generate funds to promote and foster the growth of independent content creators, allowing them to engage in their art without having to worry about being demonetized. Through a network of media partners, of which you yourself can become a part of, Independent Media Token's goal is to ensure the powers that be can never cut off all of our areas of funding and censor the only free voices left in the world. Join the movement today You can pick up Independent Media Token using Phantom Wallet or the Solana wallet of your choice, where you can easily swap your Solana for IMT. Grab some IMT today and remember to always know your team. To learn more, visit independentmediatoken.com or use the link right in the description. Are you and your family prepared for an emergency? Maybe the fake alien invasion? Now is the time to prepare yourself and your family for any event. Check out Prep Starts Now. Their mission is to provide high-quality preparedness products that empower individuals and families to be ready for any situation. They're committed to delivering reliable, trusted gear to ensure your safety, security, and peace of mind in times of need. Their product selection is carefully curated to provide you with the essential gear you need to stay prepared. From emergency kits to tactical tools, every item is chosen for its reliability and practicality. Prep Starts Now understands the importance of family, and their goal is to equip you with everything you need to build a solid plan for your family's preparedness. In today's ever-changing world, being prepared is more important than ever, and Prep Starts Now is here to help you and your family stay ready with quality products and practical guidance. Use the link in the description and get 15% off your order.